Joining us today in the Lincolnite newsroom, we have Liberal Democrats candidate for Lincoln, Kenyon. Welcome very much to the newsroom, Caroline. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We'll start, first of all, by asking you, why should the people of Lincoln turn out to the polls to vote Liberal Democrat on June the 8th?
I think the defining issue of this election has to be Brexit. And whether you voted for or against, you have to admit that it is the defining event, not only of our generation, but several generations to come. And we are currently the only significant party calling for a second referendum on the terms of the deal. We asked the people what they thought about Europe. We thought it was really important to ask the people. Now we must ask the people what the terms of the deal are.
Of course, personally, you're campaigning to represent the people of Lincoln, who the majority of whom voted for Brexit. Now, do you see that as an important thing to represent in terms of the people's vote? And would a second referendum not sort of subvert that?
No, not at all. What we're saying is we want to have your opinion on the destination. I don't think there's any contradiction in terms in that. Listening to the voice of the people was a very important part of the build-up to the referendum, and I see no reason why that voice should be silenced in terms of deciding where we're going.
Let's talk a little bit about yourself, your background. Of course, you have a business background in Lincoln and Lincolnshire, which people may know you from. Where and why did you become determined to enter politics, and the Liberal Democrats more specifically?
Well, I should be honest, I've been flirting with involvement with the political realm for about 20 years, but it's never been quite the right time. I got very close when it was the build up to the war in Iraq, and in the aftermath I was devastated by British involvement in that. I felt it was wrong, and I felt it would lead to the destabilisation of the Middle East, which is what has transpired. But unfortunately for me at the time, it wasn't right in terms of my business and my family. My son was very young then, my husband was away for work, and now I feel it's time to step up to the plate. I love Lincoln, it means a huge amount to me. I chose to live in this county. You're very lucky if you were born here, but if you choose to live here, it's a very conscious choice. So I've chosen it. I could have lived anywhere in Britain. It means so much to me, and I want to make the very best of whatever the future is for the people of Lincoln. Someone kindly pointed out that I wasn't very well known on the streets, but we all have to start somewhere. Winston Churchill started somewhere, and I'm here for the long haul. Whatever happens on June the 8th, on June the 9th, I should be planning all the exciting projects I have to help the people of Lincoln.
You mentioned Winston Churchill there. Is that as far as your ambitions go in terms of politics?
No, I think you have to be realistic. As a Liberal Democrat, being Prime Minister is probably not on the agenda, and nobody could accuse me of being an opportunist. But I regard him as my great political hero. He was, for a while, a Liberal, but a man of such great vision and genius.
Okay, talking local issues, what, if you could boil it down to three main points, are the biggest issues that you want to address in Lincoln?
The three issues that really matter to me, and I think matter to any of us, are the economy, education, and health. Now, obviously, as a businesswoman, I'm extremely sensitive to what's going on in the economy. You have to have 360-degree vision and see what's coming down the tracks, and what I see coming down the tracks ain't very good. So I'm positioning my business to withstand it, but I know there's going to be fallout, so I really, really want to help people of Lincoln withstand that fallout. There are already jobs going in the area. I know of people who have lost their jobs. With regard to education, we all know that there are desperate cuts happening, that parents are being asked to contribute to costs of schools, that teachers are being cut. This is the most misplaced economy. Our children are our future. And you're a young person. I just think that not to invest in the adults of the future is absolute folly. And then when it comes to health, you only have to see how often the Lincolnshire Health Trust features in top 10 areas of Britain which are really struggling in terms of budgets and delivering on yet another target. My stepdaughter's a doctor, my niece is a nurse, I hear about it firsthand from them. So these are the three things which really drive me.
Okay, and what can people expect to see from you in Parliament in order to achieve these solutions?
I want to be a really proactive MP. I want to be somebody who initiates projects and campaigns very actively. I think it's a fantastic thing to be a great constituency MP and listen to the anxieties and concerns and needs of your constituents and do something about it, but I want to initiate things. So in terms of being MP for Lincoln, I have numerous ideas for generating much more cross-fertilisation between business and schools. I want to start really young. You have to get children when they're young. And actually this morning I went for a meeting to evolve a project involving primary school children across Lincoln. In terms of education, the Liberal Democrats want to put 7 billion into education. They want to restore maintenance grants to homes. So I would be absolutely banging the drum for that. And in terms of health, we want to put 6 billion in, and we have been at the forefront of putting mental health as equal with physical health. And
you're confident that that this is an affordable achievement as well?
We have costed it, and one of the things which may not be palatable to everybody is our proposition that there should be a penny on the pound of tax for everybody across the board. You know, we're in tough times. Before the referendum, we were told we're the 5th largest economy in the world, we're very mighty and powerful, and strangely, 9 months later, we're being told how we are, facing very, very dire economic times from the same people. So we know we've got to pay for these things, but our bottom line is that we will cut less than Conservatives and we will borrow less than Labour.
Now, locally, the Liberal Democrats suffered, as did other parties, a complete wipeout in the county council elections recently.
Yes.
Why do you think this is?
I think it's still the fallout probably from the coalition and having to regroup. It was very striking that our membership doubled in the few weeks after the election was announced. But, again, you have to come from somewhere. We've had a significant presence on the county council in the past, and we will rebuild. I've been really encouraged by the enthusiasm, not just the enthusiasm, the quality of the people that are coming forward.
And nationally, the party does appear still to be struggling in the polls. Of course, we know very well by now that this is an indication and by no means binding, but how many seats do you realistically expect the Liberal Democrats will win in the general election?
That is rather like licking your finger and putting it up in the air. I would say 20 would be amazing. If we had 12, 14, 15, that would be a wonderful improvement. But, it's about having really intelligent vocal opposition. If Theresa May gets the landslide that she's been predicting and trumpeting, she will have absolutely carte blanche to do whatever she likes. She is already talking about, it's in her manifesto that she wants to remove free school meals. Now, that was a Liberal Democrat achievement in coalition of which I'm enormously proud. My background is in the food industry, and I've worked a lot with charities that work to end hunger. And 900,000 children who do not get free school meals are going to suffer as a result of that. We have to be there because, with all due respect to Labour, they are riven by their own internal dissent. And the Liberal Democrats are unified as the voice of opposition to a Tory landslide. As I said, I'm already evolving this concept for launching a really exciting project for primary school children to link them with secondary school children and then ultimately with the universities and industry. And I think there's so much more to be done. And I want to use my food industry contacts to support the 5 food banks in Lincoln. Lincoln produces, or rather the county produces 20% of Britain's food. Why have we got 5 food banks here? Why are people going hungry? This is outrageous. And I want to make things happen, not react to people. I want to be somebody who makes things happen.
Will you be, and perhaps it might be worth here explaining a little bit about your role in the food industry. Will you be applying that specifically to say food banks in Lincoln?
What I feel I've achieved in my own business is that I create partnerships which are fruitful for both sides. It does not need to cost money. It can be free, but what it does is that it generates something much bigger than the sum of the parts. And I've always used an enormous amount of cheek in my business. If I want to go to the top person in any field, I'll either find out their email address or I'll work it out and I'll send them a cheeky email. That's how I've built most of my business, is on cheeky emails, because at least half the time, if you ask somebody to help you on something that's worthwhile, they say yes. Most people are really kind and they're generous with their time and generous with what they can support you with. So I know that I can bring those skills. I have an ability to have an idea of what I want to achieve, what I want to build, and I make it happen. I did that with my business. I said, this is where we want to be in 6 years' time, and we've done it. That's where we are now, and I know I can do the same for Lincoln.
It's fair to say that following the launch of the party's manifesto last week, there was a feeling the pledges had been targeted at younger voters. But do you think that this will entice them back after the party's controversial coalition with the Conservatives and the U-turn on tuition fees?
Yes, I do understand there's a great deal of pain and distress over that. I think, and I have a student son, so I'm very connected to that area of distress. But what I would say is that we are in a different place now, and this election is about your future and students' future. What kind of Britain are we going to be? We are taking away from you the ability to go and work freely in Paris or Berlin or Amsterdam. All these amazing things that are being taken away from you, like, film and music that we freely access because of our partnership in the EU. While tuition fees was bad, and I know that Nick Clegg has apologised and people have derided him for it, but it was a heartfelt apology. Think about how many politicians never apologise. I think it has to be seen in the bigger scheme of things, that where this country is heading is not where most young people want it to be. And that's why I would say that the Liberal Democrats have really pinned their colours to the mast, saying, this is your country. Do you know that if the 16 to 18-year-old age group had been allowed to vote in the referendum, 82% of them would have voted Remain? So think how disenfranchised they have been. This country is being governed by old people for old people. You know, it doesn't feel right for your generation. We have to speak to young people. And as somebody who's, you know, in a few years will be nudging my way out of middle age towards being older, that is absolutely as it should be. It is about your future.
Now, you mentioned the impact that coming out of the EU will have on young people. The Lib Dems have been bold in their stance on Brexit, a hard Remain, some might say, promising a second referendum also. Is this going to cost the party support, as some critics might suggest?
Perhaps, but sometimes you have to do what is the right thing. And I genuinely believe it is the right thing. I think that we should have the right to determine what our course is going to be. And, you know, somebody has described it as you sell your house and you're going to move to a new house, but you quite like to know whether it's a 2-bedroom cottage or a 10-bedroom mansion. So who knows? Or it might be a cardboard box on the street.
So what you're saying is sort of more that, other than sort of, like I say, subverting the vote of those who did vote to leave, more the case of allowing people to reconsider when they have the fuller facts.
Everybody who voted to leave will be taking part in the referendum. So they're just as entitled to cast their vote on what they consider of the terms of the deal. And it was quite striking that the day after the referendum, what was the biggest Google search? What is the EU? So I'm not for a minute disrespecting people who voted leave. I have members of my family who voted leave. I have friends who voted leave, and I completely respect them. However, I can't square it intellectually to say that we have the right to vote on leaving the EU, but we do not have the right to determine how we leave the EU.
We'll move on to the subject of business in particular. Lincoln has a proud history in the engineering industry. It's home to some award-winning small and medium-sized businesses. The recent disappearance of a number of high street shops, brands in the city, as well as losses in major companies such as Danwood, however, have meant that the current picture for Lincoln businesses is in some cases a tentative one. As a business person yourself, what are the Lib Dems bringing to the table in order to encourage growth in local industries?
One of the proposals which I am really excited about is support for entrepreneurs. I regard myself as an entrepreneur. I had an idea for a business which had never been done before, and I went out and did it. But it was very, very low-cost investment. And I was also lucky because I was a bit older and I'm married, and my husband was willing at that time to support me when it was in startup phase. Not everybody is that lucky. So the Liberal Democrats are pledging support for entrepreneurs for their living costs. To get funding that will pay for
so what does that mean in terms of principle? How does that work?
For 6 months, they will pay £100 a week towards your living costs. Now, if you are a young man or a young woman with an amazing tech idea and all you need is a laptop and your iPhone, but you need to be able to eat that's going to make a really significant difference. It means that you've got 6 months to get out there, talk to venture capitalists, get in front of people, refine your concept. And we are going to need entrepreneurs big time over the next decades, because without them, we're in really serious trouble.
With its farming background, could Lincolnshire be the cannabis capital of the UK under legalisation plans in your manifesto?
I think that's unlikely. However, I think that nobody would disagree that the war on drugs has been a success, rather. I, a very long time ago, trained as a lawyer, and as part of my training, I had to go and sit in magistrates' courts, and it was so dispiriting how many cases were related to very, very low-level drug offences, and it absolutely congests our courts. It's a complete waste of public money. It should be a health issue.
Legalising marijuana is an attractive promise to some in the manifesto. Have you ever smoked cannabis?
No. I'm rather repelled, I must say, when I have been offered a joint, and I don't particularly want to put to my lips something that somebody else has been sucking on.
But you're happy to see it sort of legalised?
I feel that we've got the so-called war on drugs wrong, and it's very interesting that countries like Colombia, which have been riven with violence and death as a result of the so-called war on drugs, that they are calling for the legalisation of drugs. And I think it would take so much criminality out of it. I see that prostitution and the abuse of women is very involved with it. And I think if it could be controlled and monitored, and we could charge a duty on it like we do with alcohol, we might be in a much better place.
And what about for Lincoln? Do you see there being a big connection with low-level drugs and criminality in Lincoln? And would there be a visible sort of difference in taking that issue out of the legal sphere?
I think it would make a significant difference, and I think probably both the police force and the courtrooms would be extremely grateful. As I said, I think it should be a health issue, as alcohol should and is be a health issue. Yeah,
I mean, obviously there are visible, and it's a very complicated issue. That drug taking on the streets of Lincoln is an issue.
Yes.
Some critics might say that cannabis is a drug that leads to more serious drugs, more damaging drugs.
Well, there is that argument.
If it's more freely available, is that going to exacerbate?
I think it depends how it's managed, but if it's sold through approved channels, it makes it much easier to manage. I mean, look at the impact of the banning of advertising on the cigarette industry, and now the packaging looks so drear, and the number of people who are smoking has gone down. And I think we could do the same with cannabis. There are ways. I'm a great believer in a way of altering behaviour without ticking people off. It's called nudge. And it's about encouraging people into better behaviour by nudging them. For example, if you want to eat less, you have a smaller plate. It's not saying, you're greedy, stop eating so much, which is the finger-wagging way. You encourage people. And my feeling is that you can use much more nudge in changing people's behaviour.
Now, in terms of local issues, housing is a frequently referred to issue in Lincoln and Lincolnshire. How many new homes would the Lib Dem government bring to Lincolnshire?
Well, nationally, we've pledged 300,000 homes a year. I will be honest with you, I don't know what the figure is for Lincolnshire, but I have understood from someone at the County Council that there is a plan to build something like, I believe it's 20,000 homes over the next 5 years.
Yes, and are you confident that those will be affordable for young people trying to get on the market as well?
Well, I mean, that is a question, and I think it's really important to have affordable housing. I think it's so dispiriting for young people to feel excluded. We are a homeowning nation, and it's part of our culture. So when people are excluded from what is the mainstream, they understandably feel unhappy. So I think it's a question of making sure that the stipulation to developers to include affordable housing is adhered to, and that it's not sort of pushed up to the margin.
How are the Liberal Democrats proposing to reform social care? Essentially, are all earners just having to put a penny in the pot?
It is the plan is the penny in the pound on tax will go towards the health service and towards social care. The two are interwoven. What we've also done, we've set up our own commission of experts in this area to come up with recommendations, but we're also calling for it to be made a non-political issue. It's so important. And my mother-in-law died in January, aged 94, and she lived independently until the very last, and she did not want to be a bother. And she more or less flicked a switch in her brain and let go because she did not want to be a trouble to us. And I find that so moving, but not everybody is in that very lucky situation. So it should not be a political issue, it should be cross-party, and we've been calling for cross-party collaboration on this. We want a proper commission to make a plan going forward. It's as important as building the NHS was in the 1940s.
Sure. Now, many residents will be voting based on leadership on June the 8th. Have questions which have centred on Tim Farron's faith, in particular his views on gay sex and abortion, in recent weeks unfairly damaged the party in your eyes?
I think that actually people have been very fair in their response, because when you look at his voting record, it's exemplary. And dare I say it, much more exemplary than the Prime Minister's. And he voted in favour of gay marriage, and that's a matter close to my heart. My brother's gay, and I'm very sensitive to any form of homophobia. So while I can't say that, I feel very comfortable with what his inner thoughts are, I recognise that he is extraordinarily professional, and he is a true liberal in the way that he manifests himself as the leader of the party.
And through speaking to people on the doorsteps, do you feel that people aren't taking that into consideration when they're voting?
I have been asked about my views on abortion by one constituent, but they did not reference Tim Farron. So
what was your reply to that person?
I said that I actually wrote my finals thesis was about this area, and I said that I'd given myself a crash course in ethics, and I could only conclude that life begins at conception. I can't see any other point at which you say life begins. And if I followed that through remorselessly, you would say that I was opposed to abortion, but I do actually see it as a necessary evil, because I think there are so many children that are born unwanted into this world, and my parents fostered a child from a very, very unhappy, damaged home when I was little, and I realised that not every child is lucky and born to a loving home, as I and my brother were. So I think there are very strong arguments for abortion, but I think you have to be very sensitive to the advance of science and when the cut-off date is.
Yeah, a very challenging topic for the party. How do you, lastly, before we run out of time, how do you fare your chances in Lincoln, and what's been the support on the doorstep overall in the city?
Well, I have had a really lovely response because people have been happy to engage with me. I mean, I will chat to anybody. So I love hearing what people have got to say. And I don't want to tell people what they need. I want to hear from them what they want for their city and what they want for their own lives. Life is tough. And it's very easy for politicians to tell them what they need and what would make their lives better. And, possibly I'm guilty of that too, but I'm always open to what people have got to say to me. And in fact, I started out on the Lincoln High Street a few weekends ago, and there were some people who were kind of quite challenging with me. And then I saw them again on Sunday when it was the lovely event at the castle. And they were really friendly, and we sort of hailed each other like old friends. And, you can take so much enmity out of it by just chatting to people and just hearing what they've got to say. And I always want to hear what people have to say.